One leg on the ground. In the previous part of this film, we stressed the importance of teamwork. That is, support within the troop or squadron. In action, these principles must be extended to include cooperation between arms, since artillery will be providing fire support, and tanks and infantry will probably be moving forward together. It is of the first importance that all ranks of each arm should know the abilities, the difficulties, and the point of view of the other. To a great extent, this understanding can be developed during training. It was proved in wartime that men in different arms who knew each other in training had that trust in each other which is needed to win battles. So when you work together, get to know the other fellow's job and how he fights. And get to know him as a friend as well, off duty when you're playing together. To cooperate successfully, tanks and infantry must be able to talk to each other. One method is by the shortwave wireless set.
Hello, 191. Report my signals. 191, over.
Hello, 4. Okay, over.
Another method is the telephone on the back of the tank, by which an infantryman can speak direct to the tank commander. And of course, don't forget visual signals. To get the best out of combined firepower and movement, tanks and infantry must be able to show each other targets quickly. There is wireless.
3 Charlie for 191. Enemy machine gun figure 600 to your front. 11 o'clock, big fir tree. Can you engage? Over.
Over 1, Wilco, out. Shell action. Traverse right, steady, on. 600.
There is telephone. Tracer. 2-inch mortar smoke. And Very lights fired in the direction of the target. Any combination of these methods can be used. Remember, the tank aids the infantryman by fire in order to kill or neutralize the enemy. To obtain the best effect, the troop leader must control this fire in the same way that he controls the movement of his tanks. Infantry may be carried on tanks in cases where their own transport is not available or is unsuitable to the type of ground or to the method of advance. The advantage is that in any action, the two arms are in close touch with each other. But remember the disadvantages. Infantry are vulnerable and should never be carried within range of enemy small arms. Tanks are likely to draw fire, and the infantry may suffer severe casualties. With infantry up, a tank can't maneuver or fight. Never carry infantry on the leading tank, or this may happen. The ways in which tanks and infantry cooperate will vary depending on the task in hand, the position, and the type of country over which they are moving. This diagram shows tanks moving forward in open country. They avoid the road, provided the going is good, and move on each side of it. Close behind them, on the road, is the infantry. Contact with the enemy is not expected. The infantry are therefore in their vehicles to save time and energy. Tanks and infantry are at all times in wireless communication with their commander. Should isolated resistance be unexpectedly met with, as from this farmhouse, It might be overcome by a combined assault, each arm supporting the other, as shown here. For clearness, the range to the farmhouse is shown much shorter than it would be in reality. In close country, tanks should be accompanied by infantry for local protection whenever possible. If they do have to move alone, here is one way of doing it. A maneuver known as the snake patrol. To make the principle clear, the tanks are here shown on the road. First, get the mechanics of the movement. The leading tank, A, will advance to the next corner. Tank B, usually the troop leader, will support A, moving on the side of the road that gives him the best field of fire. At the same time, Tank C will close up. A advances, supported by B. C advances in turn. The two rear tanks are responsible for protecting the flanks. When A arrives at the corner, he stops and waits for B to come up before advancing further. At the same time, D, the rear tank, closes up. You will notice that a supporting tank sometimes has to creep forward to a better fire position. It is the same principle of one leg on the ground, a stationary tank ready to support a moving tank. The movement continues on this principle. Here is the snake patrol in reality. As opposition is slight and speed is essential, the advance is being speeded up by the tanks only slowing down at corners instead of halting. When the leading tanks reach the corners, they must swing their turrets. You never know what is round the corner. Again, the two rear tanks will watch the flanks. Where there are trees bordering the road, they cannot swing their turrets, as their guns would foul the tree trunks. Support between the two arms is even more intimate in close country. A platoon of the motor battalion of the Armoured Brigade is in its half tracks just behind the tanks. It is specially equipped and trained to work with tanks. Further along the road, an enemy infantry anti-tank weapon holds up the tanks. The gunner replies immediately.
Driver, halt! Hello, Easy 1 Able. Contact. Fired on by enemy bazooka, figures 7-5 to my right front. Have withdrawn to cover and am observing. Easy 1 Able. Over.
The motor platoon commander has overheard this report on his wireless set. He gives a warning order to his men. He then goes forward to see for himself. In this situation, the tanks are helped by the riflemen, and a few minutes later, their assault goes in. A little further on, an enemy machine gun holds up the riflemen. This time, the platoon commander asks the tanks for help. The tanks act immediately. anti-tank guns are encountered, and riflemen and tanks act together. If artillery support were available, it would be called for as well.
Right then, I'll give you covering fire up to the moment your chaps go in.
Okay, John, I'll be ready to move 12:25.
12:25, okay.
The tanks neutralize the enemy anti-tank and machine guns.
Log 2, Breezy 1, assaulting now, out.
The riflemen close in from the flank, thus allowing the tanks to fire up to the last possible moment. Here you see a stage in a tank and infantry advance across close country. For clarity, the distances between bounds are shown on a much reduced scale. Preparations are being made for the final movement forward to the next bound, the hedge immediately ahead. At the moment, it is being brassed up with searching fire to see if it contains anything of a suspicious nature. This fire is carefully controlled. Beezer ammunition in a tank is not unlimited. As there is no indication of the enemy, the infantry section that is going into the lead moves forward. The leading tank starts forward at tank speed so that he is in a position to give close support to the leading infantry when they reach the next hedge. That's his job, close support for the leading sections. Back with the rear sections, these tanks support the leading tank. Here too, the troop leader and the platoon commander are in direct contact with each other. The bound is gained and secured, and all is ready for the other leg to close up. The rear tank moves forward, and the main tank and infantry advance continues. Note this rear tank. It remains behind to give rear protection. The same principles apply to a combined tank and infantry advance along a road. The leading tank on one side of the road supports the leading infantry on the other side. The troop leader's tank supports the leading tank from second place, as in the Snake Patrol. And whenever possible, the two commanders keep close together during the advance. Infantry and tanks each advance at their own best speed. As the leading tank and infantry go forward to the next bound, the third tank and its accompanying infantry section move up in support. A defile is any natural or artificial feature which makes it necessary for a body of troops to narrow its front. As, for instance, a bridge across a stream or river which cannot be forded. There is a battle procedure for negotiating defiles. Such places should be anticipated from the map, and as they will probably be covered by enemy fire, a cautious approach is necessary. A troop bound overlooking the defile is always occupied. Here is the next bound, this ridge on the far side of the defile. The whole troop observes it and searches it with fire, putting down smoke if necessary. The leading infantry, if available, start off for the defile, followed by the leading tank or tanks. Here we show one tank crossing at a time. The commander might send more than one tank forward, according to the nature of the ground and the extent of enemy opposition, provided that sufficient supporting fire were available. The leading tank and infantry secure the bound on the far side. Now, covered by all available fire from front and rear, the remaining tanks cross the defile, demonstrating again the essential principle of one leg on the ground. During the war, close support was necessary in the fighting in towns and villages. In towns, such as this, the tanks support the infantry in the streets. These are actual wartime scenes showing Churchill tanks operating with infantry. In the case of small villages, the tanks cordon the built-up area with fire and block enemy escape routes whilst the actual house clearing goes on. Tanks will also assist the infantry in clearing outlying buildings with supporting fire. Tank supporting fire, quickly and accurately applied, will save casualties in the infantry. It must be controlled always by the troop leader.
Coax, stop. Travers left. Steady, on. Coax, go on. Come on!
In this case, a flag is the prearranged signal to the tank commander that the first house has been cleared. The tank switches fire again, and a second section of infantry assaults the second house, covered by their own fire as well as by the tank fire. As the operation progresses, it is most probable that the infantry will need some tanks with them among the houses to provide intimate support. The tanks should avoid the street and crash through the back gardens if they can. Hatches are kept closed against snipers and grenades. Grenade throwers in upper windows are dealt with by the supporting tank. The supporting tank, having taken action, moves up. When tanks have to fight in the streets, support comes from the tank behind and on the opposite side. The enemy are driven into the street, which is kept as a killing ground. Further down the street, the tanks approach a crossroads. Street crossings are treated as troop bounds and are never crossed without examination of the streets on each side. This will be done by the infantry, who give the tanks the all clear. Another section of infantry and the rest of the troop move up to give support to their friends on the far side of the crossroads. To sum up, tank cooperation with infantry follows the same basic pattern as tank cooperation with tank. Accurate and quick application of fire to the target by the tanks saves infantry lives, and energetic action by the infantry can remove threats to the tanks from anti-tank weapons if the tanks have not been able to deal with them with their own fire. Each arm has its own specialized role and can do things that the other can't. Acting alone, their spheres of action are often limited. Acting together, there is little ground that they can't cover and few obstacles that they can't surmount.